This episode is going to be like the doomsday one. There's climate disaster, there's wars, political division.
Research that shows that when you have an anger outburst, you're 5 times more likely to have a heart attack. There is a value in starting small in the moment. We don't need to solve our anxiety in the moment. But if you do this release piece, recognized release, you're far more likely to come from a more grounded place of semblance.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Dealing with Feeling podcast. I'm Marc Brackett, founding director of the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence and author of Permission to Feel and Dealing with Feeling. Today, I'm delighted to have on my podcast Dr. Elisha Goldstein. Elisha is a friend for multiple years now. He is also a clinical psychologist by training, who has been practicing for over 20 years, and also the author of multiple books, including his new book, which is coming out soon, called Tiny Shifts: How Emotional Health Transforms Stress, Relationships, and Longevity. I just loved our conversation, and I know you will too. So, here we go. Welcome, Elijah.
Great to be here with you.
Good to see you again.
Yeah.
It's been how many? I guess the last time we saw each other was in LA.
Yeah. Dinner, great time.
And then we did your podcast actually when I was in my hotel in Santa Monica.
Yeah. We've done a couple podcasts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And now I have the chance to kind of go deep into your work with your new book, Tiny Shifts, and I'm excited to talk to you about it.
All right, let's see what we unpack.
So before we jump in, why don't we let people know from your perspective, give us your 2-second bio so people know who I'm talking to.
I'm a clinical psychologist. I'm an author of multiple books prior to Tiny Shifts. I live in Los Angeles with my family, 3 what I call spirited boys. And, my mission really in as far as professionally is I just see this world, people with a increasing amount of overwhelm and stress that I'm noticing. And if I can support people in helping to mediate their emotional health so they can feel more grounded and a greater sense of kind of control over what they want to pay attention to instead of being pulled by all the unconscious hooks around them, then that's time well spent for me.
And time well spent in today's world where I feel as, someone who comes at it from the science side of being a scientist around emotions and emotional intelligence, as an observer of the world we're living in, I'm just thinking, I thought my life and my job would be easier as the years progress, but it's really becoming more and more difficult, I'm finding.
What do you say more about that?
Just observing, what our society is doing to not support people's healthy emotional and mental health development.
Yeah, I mean the way I see it, and not is, if we just pause for a minute and look at the state of where things are, most of us are uh, engaging with the world through a variety of media that's out there,
Yeah.
and certainly our media, the news that we get is becoming more and more breaking in so many ways, and more focused on hooking us, and no doubt more and more reliant on artificial intelligence to try and find the moral outrage out there and feed us that a bit more. And then, of course, that's all happening in our social media, and that's where a lot of us spend time.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like what's happened is we've created a low grade, sometimes high grade, but low grade chronic stress
Mm-hmm.
that we just think is normal right now. You're probably familiar with the parable of those 2 fish swimming in the ocean, and they're like just these 2 young fish swimming in the ocean, and there's like an older fish coming by, and he's like, "Hey boys, how's the water?" And they look at him kind of confused, and then they continue on, and they're like, "What the hell is water?" And
Mm-hmm.
so we're like, that's the water we're swimming in. We just think it's normal right now to be like constantly hooked, so we feel like we're sort of treading water and just surviving or just
Mm-hmm.
managing. How are you doing? Fine. With like a
Yeah.
type of thing. I think more and more people are just kind of living on that in that way right now.
I find myself actually with a lot of kind of dissonance in terms of, I'm 56, I've got a secure job, I'm in a healthy relationship, and I think about my nuclear self, as someone, I'm doing okay. My life is pretty good, to be honest. And then I step outside and I feel like a little guilty for my personal life being so good. And at the same time, having like this feeling of an existential crisis around spending 25 years of my life, 30 years of my life trying to help people develop the skills they need to navigate their emotions, and feeling like it's just like this, I'm going up this mountain that just seems to get steeper and steeper.
You're like swimming against the stream.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean,
So maybe this could be
but
you're a former year.
I want to affirm you, Mark, that you're doing really great work and you're helping a lot of people and you're
Thank
making a
you.
big impact. Yeah,
I
and
appreciate
I
that.
will say, just for everyone to hear, this is your podcast, so everyone here knows your work, but you're changing the younger generations too, which is
Yeah.
or influencing them, which is also which is very important for the future.
Yeah.
Um,
I
but
appreciate
for a
that.
lot of for a lot of us, like parents in particular, let's say, or teachers or educators or anyone who's on the other end of this podcast right now, you might feel that. You might feel what so that's that dissonance. But I mean, I feel it in my life for sure. This is not me saying, I'm outside of this. There is this kind of sometimes what I call is kind of like a zombie hamster wheel. We're
Yeah.
just kind of living in a particular routine. The reason I call it a zombie hamster wheel is because we're typically unconscious about it.
Yeah.
It's that water we swim in, and the problem with this that we aren't aware of right now because we're sort of living in a great experiment is that low grade chronic stress, that overwhelm that we sort of like live with because we're juggling so much, the WhatsApp groups, the texts, the Slack messages, the
Hmm.
emails, the news, the social media, the amount of responsibility, of urgency and response that we is just kind of natural to us now.
Hmm.
That has a physiological and a biological impact too. So it's not
Yeah.
just behavioral of like I just feel overwhelmed. I wish I felt better. But so speaking of emotions, if we're if our teacup is full and it only takes a little bit for us to kind of get to snap a little bit or just to get overwhelmed. I mean, there's research that shows that when you have an anger outburst, as an example, if you have any heart disease issues or any propensity towards any kind of heart issues at all, you're 5 times more likely to have a heart attack a couple
Yeah.
hours later,
Hmm.
right? You've probably heard of that. So, this has we when we're living with our cortisol increased on a regular basis, we have trouble sleeping.
Hmm.
We reach for uh, more gluttony or sugary foods to temporarily
Hmm.
reduce the cortisol. Not that any of that's bad on like in total, but that has a lot of impact on our physical health too.
Yeah. All right. So now that we've gotten down the whole of all the things that are kind of challenging, and in terms of society's kind of weird right now. I mean, it's definitely the weirdest society that I've ever been in.
It's
Um,
yeah, weird and
I
exciting
mean,
all at the same time.
you just had a major tragedy in LA, with Rob Reiner's passing or murder by his own
Hmm.
son, and the
Yeah.
complexities around that with our government. um, and I want to jump into the work that you're doing, because I don't want this to be this. I feel like all of a sudden like this episode is gonna be like the doomsday one, but actually, what you're saying in your book Tiny Shifts is that there are these little things that we can do every day for ourselves, even for other people, to have better emotional, physical, and mental health. And so let's just dive into that for a minute. Well, more than a minute. But so why, you know, it's funny because as I was preparing to talk with you, I was thinking about my and I'm going to get negative again for a minute, but my frustration with social media and influencers talking about like not tiny shifts, but they make it sound like that, like the quick fix thing. Like, I'm going to throw my anxiety out the door, and you just do like, one breath, and like you're clear and you're free. And I do that, and then I'm like, I'm still negatively thinking. I'm still having negative. um, so tell us your conception of these tiny shifts.
Oh, yeah. So I feel like there's those kind of quick fixes on social media, and there's also the promises of like massive transformation at the
Yep.
same time. Um, this is more about, look, everyone, look, this is we're living moment to moment.
Uh-huh.
This is about the moments we're in, and we have far more of those than the yoga sessions or meditation sessions or whatever we do that's kind of good for us. There's far more everyday moments of our lives.
Mm-hmm.
And when we make small emotional pivots, so emotional pivots, what I mean by that is how we're relating to how we're feeling, a lot of also what you talk about, and how we're relating to how we're thinking. And when we can interrupt what I call that emotional loop that's there, it's happening to us in any given moment. So I'll give you an example. When I went to write this book, and this is going to loop back into your question. When I went to write this book, Tiny Shifts, the first thing came up to me was I had this voice kind of inside of my head that says, well, is it worth it to put all this effort into this book? Haven't other people already said something like this better?
Mm-hmm.
Hasn't Mark already done this better, in some ways? Right. So, and so what I
Or
would
did
kind
it?
of, what,
No, go ahead.
And so what I would kind of name that is there's this self-doubt. So this self-doubt is something that a lot of us experience when we're trying to push against the edges of growing something.
Mm-hmm.
Or there's moments of shame we experience, or moments of anger, or frustration, or irritation. And you're great at talking about emotional granularity too, and getting very specific with those and talking about the nuance of that. And sometimes all we need to do first. So if you can think of like atomic habits, and you think of like the atomic habits of
Mm-hmm.
emotional health in some way, there is a value in starting small in the moment. We don't need to solve our anxiety in the moment. We don't need to do a few breaths and just feel better. The idea isn't feeling better. The idea is, can you notice a shift a
Mm-hmm.
little bit? So we know that, as an example. So in here, in tiny shifts, to get out of the overwhelm, we have to start small.
Yep.
So we're not trying to do anything big. We're trying to start small. So that's kind of the idea of that: small emotional pivots that happen in the moment. And the very first step of this, the framework of this whole thing, is something that I also tried to create that was simple and memorable, which is something I call the 4R method. And in here, the very first step is something that is in your ruler model as well, and in so many different models, and in a lot of the world's wisdom traditions, and in our current field of psychology and science, which is
Mm-hmm.
just the important that awareness is the entry point. So we recognize, like you said, right? And we recognize that moment, or are able to kind of name what's happening. So and for me, I say recognize the loop. And I like to be kind of playful with it. Like, so for me, I'd recognize the self-doubt loop. I'd recognize the shame loop. I'd recognize the I'm a bad parent loop, or kind of have fun with the naming of it.
Mm-hmm.
And what that does is
That's the emotional loop, by the way.
that's the emotional loop.
So the emotional loop from your framework um, is the looking in the mirror and saying, whatever you're saying negatively about yourself. It's the waking up in the morning, about to start your work, and having that moment of like, this is ridiculous. Why am I doing this? It's the parenting moment where you fuck up and you are like, this is never. I should have never been a parent. Like that kind of stuff.
I should have never been a parent loop. Whatever, if you want to make
Yeah.
it kind of fun like that, yeah. If you want to make it playful, you can create names like that, which help kind of. We know humor helps mediate the emotional activation
Yeah.
as well. The loop is just like, it's a combination of physical sensations in our body, the emotion that's present there, the certain thoughts that we're having, and maybe an action we're doing, like scrolling or snapping or
Yeah.
whatever we might be doing, pacing. And by naming it, and we've known this research for a long time now by Matthew Lieberman out of Naomi Eisenberg, are you familiar with at UCLA, where when we're able to kind of name an emotion, actually name the feeling, we bring more activity and blood flow to the prefrontal region, more
Yeah.
involved with impulse control, emotion regulation, like that's your spot. And then we have a little bit more wherewithal. So for me, the way I describe it is I like to say that creates a small space, a very small space to be aware of, where we've accessed a little bit of a choice point, but typically that's not enough at all.
Yeah.
And that's a very slippery moment. I'm like, oh, there's anxiety here. I'm in the anxious loop. I'm in the, I'm fucked up parent loop, whatever you want to say. Right.
Well,
And
it seems like,
so,
but just to jump in for a second, it
yeah.
seems like for a lot of us, myself included, that sometimes even the recognition of that loop can add like a meta experience or emotion on top of it. Like you start then, this has been this way forever. Like you start having,
So
like,
it's interesting that you
like,
say that. Yes. So what happens is, on its own, it only gives you enough little space. This is the exercise avoidance loop. This is the should loop. This is the whatever. And then if that was it on its own, sometimes just to be fair, sometimes on its own, that's enough to kind of
yeah,
allow you to make a different decision, right? And allow you to kind of shift the
yeah,
way that you see things, perspective, right?
I think I mean, for someone like us who have PhDs in psychology, it's can be more help. Like I know, like Mark, this is not going the right way. Like this is not good. Like move on, Mark, or whatever it is, or go into my helpful strategies. But we have that kind of recognition and awareness, and also a tool bag of strategies.
And a lot of
95%,
experience, yeah,
yes.
with a personal
Like my whole
experience,
thing
right?
recently is like I've been having this revelation around. I call it rainy days, sunny days. It's been a lot more rainy days in my life. Not again, it's more like observation of the rainy days, and but I'm like, Mark, you're 56. There's been 3,372 rainy days, and also 5,000 sunny days.
Uh-huh.
And
You're creating some perspective. Yeah.
yeah. But for a lot of people, I think, and a lot of the kids that I work with these days, and I want to jump into, I'm going to ask you to add to your thinking when I
Hmm.
mention this to you, because the concern for me is when I'm working with people these days, they don't say I feel anxious, they say I am anxious.
Yes. Right.
Like I am the,
It's an
embodiment.
identifier. This is my identity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So recognize, the loops, the emotions, the pattern. Um,
Or the action you're in that moment. If that's something that's part of it, you can enter into the loop in any place. So it could be it's typically going to be your body, because that's the barometer. That's the first signal, typically for most people, even more than their emotions, I would say, because emotions, you have to take an extra step to kind of like name something. Your body, you feel that. The
uh-huh.
emotions, the next. I would say the emotions, because most of us don't grow up, more and more nowadays, because of your work, thank you, is there's more and more kids growing up with more of the ability to kind of name their
Sure.
emotions. But when we grew up, that wasn't really the case. So people our age, is a little difficult, a little more challenging to do that. But that would be the next step. Thoughts are a little more elusive, but sometimes we can get to that. But any of these could be the first point of action.
Yeah.
Um,
I have a
yes,
quick question about that though, because I noticed with myself, even though like my whole life is about emotions, that
right.
my natural tendency is not to Mark, how are you feeling? Which is bizarre. I'm not sure I even should say this in public or on this podcast, but my natural tendency is to be a little more self-critical. I guess because maybe I'm a scientist, I'm a professor, I'm very cognitive, and
You
so
also probably have some transgenerational trauma that
yeah,
is there. I would say that would probably lend itself to that.
thank you.
Yeah.
um, but the well, I'm just curious because I do tend to be more cognitive, and it's
Hmm.
I know I'm having a feeling, obviously, because I feel the hijacking or that like activation level.
When you say I
Um,
feel it,
I
you're
do
you're
feel the
you're you're
emotion. I'm
naming
not
something
sure what I'm
physical,
feeling.
right?
I'm not
Yeah.
sure what I'm feeling. It's not like contentment or elation. Usually, it's on
Hmm.
that left side of the mood meter. But but I go into the cognition around the emotion primarily, meaning if it's a threat, if it's a threat, or I feel threatened, or I feel fear, I go into the that whole kind of like, why it's happening to me, I can't believe this, this should, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, you're in the loop, right?
Yeah, so that's the loop.
Yeah.
um what comes next?
Okay. So the moment you're able to kind of name that, you're saying like that's helpful, but that's not always enough, right? You can slip into another form of self-critical thinking or something like that. You're like, oh great, I was able to kind of notice that I'm in this kind of messed up state, and then and then
Well,
something else
and
kind
the
of comes
stimulus
in.
isn't going away, right? So, not the stimulus doesn't always go away, right?
Yeah.
Like when you
Yeah.
hear about a massacre in Australia, you know,
Yeah.
it's not
Hmm.
like, okay, I'm aware of how I'm feeling about it. Now I'm better. Your brain goes into a lot
But
of,
let me take that a step further. You hear about the massacre in Australia, and then you get about 6 or 7 different WhatsApp or
yeah,
messages from people, and then you're engaging with it throughout the day, and then you get another piece of news that comes in, and then like it kind of seeps into a work conversation. So we're getting hit with this stuff like far more than we would have back in the day. I think when you got a newspaper once every 3 days, and you kind of checked in
yeah.
like what's happening in the world today. But so you're able to kind of recognize that the next step, it's actually to make this really simple,
Hmm.
right? That's the idea of like tiny, simple. We're trying to like do a 180-degree shift from the overwhelm loop here. um, we're saying like, okay, well, if Mark, you notice it in your body when I get hijacked, it was, you're, even when you did that movement, for those of you who are watching, if you're just listening, his body kind of like tensed a little bit and his arm kind of went up. We have to meet it in the body. So, because that's the very first thing. If your body is reacting and tensing, going through its own fight, flight, freeze response to some degree, that's where we want to do the next intervention. So we recognize it, we're aware of it. So the next step that helps us not fall into that next loop, that slippery, what I call slippery moment, is we need to work on releasing it somatically. This doesn't have to take a lot of time. This could be very simple. In fact, for me personally, I notice I hold a lot of my hijacking that happens in my shoulders. Like
Hmm.
I could be sitting, even if I'm scrolling and looking at things, I can notice my shoulders are kind of up. I work with a client of
Hmm.
mine who, as soon as I talk to him on the phone, I could tell like, oh, this guy's under some distress right now. He had 2 aging parents, with one with dementia that he was helping care of. He had a challenge in his a personal marriage that was happening, 2 young kids that he was taking care of, and then a job that he had taken over from his family that he was having a lot of self doubt around.
Uh-huh.
But when I saw him and he came into my office, his body was hunched over. You could see the tiredness in his eyes. Like, and you can kind of see all of that. So I asked him, he says, I'm just really stressed. I said, how do you know? How do you know you're stressed? And he said, well, I guess I feel it in my shoulders. And so that's why
Hmm.
I'm telling a story, because it reminds me of myself.
Yeah.
And so, and the point of that is now he's made stress, not just this thing, overwhelm, not just this thing out there that I can just say cognitively, but now I've made it tangible. It's physical now.
Yeah.
And so that there's the value to that in this release step. This next step is to say, what would happen if you just took a moment and just kind of lowered your shoulders for a moment? So you give someone an experience. What happens, and you do it together, what happens if you just kind of like lower your shoulders? Let's just pause for a minute and see what you notice. And if you give someone space, there you go.
I'll
Yeah.
do it myself.
Yeah.
I have the
If
same
you,
thing. I get very tense, and I have what I call like neurotic professor posture, which is I tend to, when I get like uptight or I get a little insecure, I do this.
oh, yeah. And when you do that, do you know it takes a lot more. Our heads are like what, 20 something pounds or something like that.
I think
And when you
mine's
go
like
like
30.
30, if I could be 35, something like that. And
Yeah.
so it actually puts a lot more strain on your neck. And so your body is, when it's noticing the strain, it has to compensate for that emotionally too,
Yeah.
because now you got more, more stress kind of happening, and that could lead to different things. So these are small things, right? So, but these small things matter. Small
Yeah.
things add up. You put a drop in a bucket, over time, that bucket's going to overflow. This all nature, logic, all of it kind of like plays here. So in order to release that tension or whatever we're holding in that moment, we can do that. And I'll give everyone here, or you too, I know that kind of like do this breath thing, and I'm fixed, and I'm kind of over that type of idea. But I want to kind of show you something that's sort of cool. So
Sure.
if I took a breath right now, right, watch what happens to my shoulders. They rose a little bit, right? They rose, if you can see, it's like a small micro amount. If you when you exhale, they fall just a little bit. Now, what
Uh-huh.
happens when your shoulders fall? We have these muscles that are connected to our shoulders. And if you pay attention, what's happening is you're elongating the muscle on the out breath. So you're actually loosening your physiology.
Mm.
If I notice, for me, when I pay attention to that, so I'm going to mention just one other thing after this that's connected to this, that's very important for us to understand. When I pay attention to that, I feel a little bit more space in the
Mm.
moment. I feel it. I experience a little bit more space. And that's what we're after here. So if we recognize something and we get a little space, we've popped out of it. Sometimes that's enough. Like, I'm in the should loop. I'm in the messed up parent. We talked about this later, how to name these loops. But if we look towards a release and we can widen that space, now we have more wherewithal to begin directing our attention. And that's
Mm-hmm.
what we need. We need to fertilize that soil. We need more space to be able to redirect before we redirect. That's why people like just kind of doing cognitive shifts. Like, let me just think differently. Let
Mm-hmm.
me just like, shouldn't I just be? And I know you and I are both a big fan of leaning into being more appreciative of things as the genuine nature of gratitude, not as a platitude, but actually as a
Yeah.
genuine practice. When you can get behind it, it's very powerful. But if you just kind of recognize and gratitude, it seems Pollyanna, our brains are too smart for that, and it doesn't really work that effectively unless our stress is kind of low, or unless you have just a ton of practice and your brain can just grab onto
Uh-huh.
it or whatever, right? So we're loosening. We're trying to loosen our muscles. So the release can come in that kind of form. The release can come in just kind of shaking our bodies out. The release can
Oh,
come in
stretch
just kind
or
of like
movement. Yeah.
moving your shoulders, stretching a little bit. I do this in the beginning of a lot of my practices with people. It can come in a brain dump, a quick brain dump, if you need to do that out on paper. You need to sing or shout. And there's different ways of you're just trying to release the energy a little bit. The importance of noticing the shoulders, the muscles. I'll just kind of loop back to that quickly. The shoulders elongating, because there's two different parts of the brain. I like to kind of think of it as like a spinning gear and a steady gear. And the spinning gear is like when we're in the loop. That's what you and I and other people maybe are listening here know as a default mode network. It's kind of preparing, planning. It has a lot of really benefits, it's creative, a lot of things. But we tip the scales of stress, it starts to get a little bit more negative. It starts to get a little bit more worrying. We start to fall into rumination. And for me, I used to struggle deeply with insomnia, and that was just the spinning gear on high when I was lying down at night. We don't want to stop the spinning gear. You can't say stop spinning gear and it just stops, right? Our brain's too smart for that. So we need to engage what's called the steady gear. This is more the present focus network. So when I'm taking a breath in and taking a breath out, and not just doing that so I can relax, I'm doing it so I can loosen the physiology that's just been hijacked. That's the reason I'm doing it. I'm doing it to correct this overwhelm response, the stress response that's there. And I notice my shoulders elongating. The noticing of my shoulders elongating is engaging the steady gear, which has a seesaw effect with the spinning gear. When one goes up, the other one goes down.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of trying to stop the insomnia and stop the anxiety and stop the depressive thinking or loathing or whatever, these types of things that are happening, or just our overwhelm, what we want to do is re-engage a different gear. That's what's going to have the seesaw effect. So that's why I just wanted to loop that back around to that breath and what the intention of the shoulders. I know it seems so small and so simple, but all we're doing there is just trying to widen the space. We're not trying to solve and just feel better, but we are probably creating a little bit more calm. We're putting a little bit
Hmm.
more drop in there as a result of that. So I just wanted to note that because that was important as part of this release step.
Great. But we're only on two of the R's though, right?
Yeah, we're only on 2 of the R's. That's right. But these can all happen pretty quickly. Yeah.
Yes. And I think that's part of the thing. It's like you're doing a macro explanation of all this.
Yeah.
But the for me it's I guess the it's a little bit of the doom scroll, whether it's like at night, and I have that moment of like, Mark, this is not good. Like enough, enough of that. And then I can take that breath to just kind of reset, and just kind of, and now what comes next?
You're just taking the breath to kind of get a little bit more wherewithal. If that's what you're doing, if you're taking a breath as a form of kind of like, what I also like to do, and this is just for it, we'll talk about what comes next. Um, but sometimes what's been powerful for people I work with, just to kind of show the both the simplicity and also for you to try it out on your own and just see what you notice, because ultimately your experience is going to be your guide. Is to actually literally, if you were in bed doom scrolling, and you mentioned this, and this is like, oh, that's a small moment. What are you talking about? I feel someone on the other end of this could be like, I feel, my problems are way bigger than just doom scrolling at night,
Sure.
that kind of thing. But these little things, that doom scrolling at night, that engaging with all of the news media texts, that uh, raging in traffic, that continually trying saying yes to everyone when you should say
Hmm.
no. So you're carrying this heavy rock and this burden until your arms fall off. You know, these things all add up, and that's kind of the point here. I just want to underscore for everyone, so we're
Hmm.
all understanding this together. Is this water we're swimming in, this low grade chronic stress, has impacts on our relationships? We don't see it because it's small sometimes, but that it adds up impact on our relationships, impact on our physiological health, and certainly impacts on our health span and longevity. So I
Yeah.
just want to kind of note that, right?
Well, what you're
So,
getting at is
yeah,
the accumulation. So I'm giving you just,
yes,
the it could be that I wake up in the morning and I have the loop about purpose in life. It could be that I'm in meetings and I'm like, why am I doing this? I can't stand these people. And then it's the drive home where you're angry at the traffic and you're angry at the world. And then it's the news at night over dinner. And then it's the doom scrolling at night. It's the additive kind of.
I wanted to give the macro so that when we were
Yeah.
talking about these everyday moments, that it doesn't seem like, well, big deal. These are just the small moments of life. Yes, these are all the small moments, and these are the ones we want to meet. So when I'm doom scrolling at night, and I'm because this would be like my example as an example, doom scrolling at night, and I sit there and I'm like, okay, this was a kind of something I wanted to kind of cut out because I read somewhere that doom scrolling at night keeps me up at night or whatever, not
Hmm.
healthy for me, right? So I'm recognizing, I'm noticing, I'm entering into the emotional loop through my action, not through my emotion or how I'm feeling physically in my body. It's the doorway here is through my action.
Yeah.
It's the doom scrolling that's waking me up. Then I take a moment and notice, am I holding any tension in my body anywhere? As I'm going to bed at night, am I holding any tension in my body anywhere? Oh, yeah, actually, in my shoulders or my stomach is a little bit tense. Okay, great. So now we want to kind of move towards release. Just as so I
Well,
recognize,
I
I
wouldn't say
release.
okay, great, but
Okay, well, no. Okay, great. I recognized it.
there you
Yes,
go.
absolutely. We teach in meditation, like people think like when their wandering mind is a problem. And it's like, no, when it wanders, okay, great. Yep, bring it back. Okay. So same thing
Understatement.
here. So we notice it. Okay. So we recognize it. For me, I would at night, I would notice there was a tension in my stomach. It would be kind of, if I really paid attention to it, there'd be a tension there. And so what I would do as a release is I would take 10 breaths again, I'm 180-degree shift with my physiology. That's all I'm
Yeah.
really trying to do here. I would take deep breaths, and my stomach would expand, because what I'm trying to do is loosen the muscles. They're contracted. I want to stretch them.
Yeah.
That's really what I do. I do that. And then on the exhalation, I would literally say in my mind, release.
Yeah.
And that may sound just, I would try it on for yourself. When you say that, release and you let it go a little bit longer, maybe there's a feeling that can come on. Remember, you're not doing this to, it's not an outcome oriented thing. What you're really trying to do is stretch the muscles. You're doing a 180-degree shift, and then you're trying to move into this release, widen the space. Then, now that after you do that, then you can do this third R refocus. Okay. So, this third R refocus is about, it's about, if this is all, let's say with the analogy of a car, now you're taking the steering wheel and you're able to redirect your attention. And why is that important? Because wherever your focus goes, it creates an energy that's there.
Yeah.
And if in your mind is constantly prompting you, what's wrong with me? What's wrong with this world? What's going to go wrong in
Yeah.
this scenario, right? You talked earlier about like how your mind can have a propensity towards, I'm not talking about you, I'm talking about all of us, right? And so, so we want to redirect that in a way that is going to be healthier for us and serve us. So I sometimes talk. I like, I don't know. Everyone's got their own thing around artificial intelligence and the introduction of that in our
Uh-huh.
culture, and whether it's a good or it's a problem. But I like the analogy of thinking about this now gives us ability after we recognize and release, we widen that space to be able to access our natural intelligence. But all we need are better prompts. Just like with artificial intelligence, we need better prompts for our natural intelligence. And so we ask ourselves the question, I think the one, the tattoo in our brain, which has become a platitude, I think, but is an important question. There's lots of different questions you could prompt your mind with to have it come up with better answers. Is, what am I really needing right now? If
Mhm.
you ask that genuinely, and allow it to set it, for those of us in this field and this work and of, whatever, that kind of question has become a platitude. But if you ask that, what it does is it immediately starts to surface maybe an unmet need
Mhm.
that's there. And for me with insomnia, I needed some more ease, I needed some more calm, I needed some more grounding.
What if it's in a relationship? What if like you have the
Uh-huh.
recognition, you're in bed with your lover, partner, wife, whatever,
Yeah.
and you realize that you're both on your phones doom scrolling. One of them is looking at, is unhinged. I'm joking. I'm making this up.
Yeah. Oh, sure you are.
And the other one is thinking like, I really just want to cuddle, or I really just, I'm craving connection.
Yeah.
Um, I feel like the action, like for me, when it's like I do a lot of the thinking stuff that you're talking about. I like cognitive strategy. So I would say things like, Mark, you need to go to bed. You need to be your best self in the morning. You're giving a talk, you're doing this, let it go. And then I just do a little bit of that kind of self-coaching, if you want to call it that. And it does
Hmm.
help. And I usually go into a meditation, or like a breathing exercise to refocus my brain, where I'll do some kind of breath work with a little bit of phrases. And then by the time I'm gotten through the phrase 2 or 3 times, I'm ready falling asleep, which is
You've engaged the steady gear instead of the spinning gear. Yeah.
exactly. But that's more if I'm like traveling and I'm alone and, I'm stressed or overwhelmed, I'll do
Hmm.
that kind of self-coaching like you're talking about. But I'm curious to know how this applies to when the, when you, when what you need is not just something you can get from yourself, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we all live in relationship. We're not islands. So in here, when you talk about this, so typically there's 4 R's: recognize, release, refocus, and then with this last one, reinforce, which is about actually uh, creating what's called emotional tagging, which is creating a memory after the shift so you remember it. But
Mm-hmm.
and here in Tiny Shifts, I also talk about in this later chapter around is specifically focused on relationships. We add another R in there, and the R is request.
Mm.
Recognize, release, refocus, request. So if you're there and you're in bed and one person is doom scrolling and the person's unhinged or whatever it might be,
Well, let's say they're
and,
both doom
and
scrolling.
okay, whatever it is, and so you're recognizing this, and you're recognizing you're feeling a little uncomfortable. Maybe you are someone who can has done work in this area, and so you do have some emotional granularity. You can actually name the feeling of um,
Lonely, disconnected.
Lonely, disconnected. Sure. The better we
Longing.
can get at, yeah, the better we can get at that. We can use, um, we can, if anyone here obviously wants to get better at that, you can look at Mark's mood meter map, or I think is it called still called that, right?
Yeah,
And
mood
yep,
meter. Hmm.
mood meter map. Or there's a variety of ways to get better at being able to label your emotions, and you can say lonely, disconnected. That helps. It really helps to be able to kind of name the specific feeling. So recognizing this, taking a moment, and okay, so I just take a moment with this to kind of like lower my shoulders or take a breath, release, only to widen the space, so
Hmm.
that I can realize like what I need right now is to feel more connected with my partner who's here. And so I'm going to make a request. And then I feel, then I might get caught into another loop where I feel, just to kind of name the reality of that, I might feel a little resistance. I feel some fear because there might be some rejection or what's on the other line of that. So maybe I decide
Hmm.
to stay small and not have that communication. So we can kind of fall
Yeah.
into these, what I call these slippery moments or these extra loops that are here. But let's say we actually were able to name that. In a past book that I wrote called The Now Effect, I said it's like this, which was really kind of another way of saying naming the loop, and then noticing these other little smaller loops kind of come in, and I say and this too, which is to kind of recognize
Hmm.
the normalcy of that happening. So let's say then we make a request. So the request is, I borrow from nonviolent communication with that, because I think Marshall Rosenberg did a great job at creating a model for making this type of request.
Hmm.
I'm noticing when we're both sitting here on our phones, and I'm looking over and you're kind of looking at this and I'm looking at that, then I'm feeling a little lonely and disconnected. And I'm noticing what I'm needing right now is to feel, or desiring or needing is to feel more connected and connected with you. What do you say? Both of us kind of put our phones down, or maybe like tomorrow night we create a time where we can both put our phones down and just kind of talk a little bit. What do you think about that?
Hmm.
So there's the request
Yeah.
in that moment.
Great.
Yeah. And if
Um,
I'll say this, Mark, just to kind of put a little exclamation point on it for a second. If you notice that your partner turns to you and says like, wow, I'm noticing the same thing. Or, that's a good idea. I like that. And there's some kind of something that comes out of that, and you feel good. You feel like this kind of little shift from that.
mhm.
Then you want to take a moment with that. And this is the reinforce the last stage. You can do this personally. You can do this after a relationship, after a relational moment, and you take a moment with yourself, and it's a small moment, and it helps if you create some kind of physical touch. You don't have to. You can do this multiple ways, but this is something called emotional tagging. I just want to kind of name this, because what it helps do is it helps memory. It helps our brain remember that,
Mhm.
oh, this matters. I want to remember this for next time. So it's not just a fleeting moment, so that I can build on it and create repetition so my brain can memorize procedures and it can come to me more automatically. So literally, if you literally close your eyes and just take a snapshot of the moment, because we do so much with photos right now, I think this is a nice thing to do. I do this myself. I take a kind of snapshot and I say to myself, this matters. I literally see the words coming
Mhm.
up in my mind, this matters. Sometimes I'll put a hand on my heart or a hand on my belly, and I'll say to myself, like, this matters. I have a little acronym that goes with this too. We won't get into that. But uh, that's an important piece if we want to help make these changes more automatic for us.
Yeah, I really like that because I think that like you're saying, it it's also the memory of the shift, right? So it's the memory of the experience where you're holding each other or you're talking instead of looking at your phones. And I think the idea behind that is that the next time you're in bed, you might have that pop up, that memory to then enact as a more preventative way of cultivating the relationship that you're looking for.
Yeah, so much of this is top of mind, having things top of mind. We have so many
Yeah.
things that are grabbing for our attention right now. It's like you said, it's kind of you're walking up a hill, pushing a boulder up the hill, or swimming against the stream. We have to do things to support these types of memories of what matters to us and what's important to us. Otherwise, we're being told what matters and is important to us, and trillions of dollars are being spent on that. So unless we are active participants in this for our own lives, we're gonna, we'll be a little bit of a marionette to, just
Hmm.
whatever is kind of pulling our attention. Yeah.
So, Elijah, how do you apply this? I see how very clearly. And by the way, the doom scrolling in bed, I'm not sure it's doom scrolling necessarily. It might just be whatever. But
Scrolling.
I
Yeah.
find that with my husband and I, oftentimes I find it relaxing to go through stupid, like I do stupid
Yeah.
videos,
It
and
could
I
be
find
soothing. Right.
it is soothing for me. I mean,
Yeah.
I can get caught, doing the things that activate me, but I tend not to go that way. I'm pretty good about that. But nevertheless, the thing that I was thinking about truthfully was the way you communicate that need. Because I notice, like, it sometimes in my relationship, it can be more like a blaming thing where it's like, I thought we agreed that we're not going to do tech in bed. And then it's like, that's a trigger, right? Because,
Hmm.
or, oh, he'll say something to me like, oh, now that you're bored with your scrolling, now you want to hug me, stuff like that. And and I think this is helpful to just think about it in terms of there is a style of communicating that can be, um, when you're stating your
More
hope or your
skillful.
need, yeah, more skillful. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's why I think those first two R's are essential. And I think most people miss the second R, which is the release.
Yeah.
And most people go from like recognizing like, hey, I feel kind of uncomfortable about this. Let me talk to him about it. And you're talking to him from an act, not you, but I'm just giving it as an
Yes.
example, from an
No.
activated state, which then the
Yeah.
prosody of your voice is going to come across a little more frustrated or irritated or
Yeah.
something like that. But if you do this release piece, recognize release, you're far more likely to come from a more grounded place of semblance, and probably the prosody of your voice is going to come across differently, your energy is going to come across differently. You also create a little more space to decide how I want to be,
Yeah.
how I want to come across, versus just being impulsive about
Yeah.
it, which is most of us walk around like that because again, we're in a kind of a lot of us, we don't realize it, just kind of reinforce this, we are in a low grade chronic stress state. We just are, just based on, I don't know, the world we live in right now and how we're engaged with it. And so we're far more likely to be kind of just a little bit impulsive about how we are reacting and responding to each other.
Hmm.
And if we take that moment just to release, again, 3 seconds, 5 seconds, 10 seconds, whatever you want, it doesn't have to be very long. You're just more likely, you're just creating more coherence in your brain to be able to engage the next moment with more intention.
I mean, this applies to so many things. It applies to being someone in my position who runs a large center with 35 employees and I'm about to give somebody feedback. Especially if it's like I witnessed something that I don't think is, maybe someone behaves weirdly, or maybe the presentation isn't great, or the paper is not so well written, and you're about to go into that, like whatever it's going to be, the feedback session. And I think the same, it applies there because it just, you recognize I'm having a feeling about this, like you are embarrassing me or you are incompetent or whatever the thing is that's going on in your mind. And you just, okay, just that reset to allow yourself to, in my work, be the, like, kind of activate the best version of yourself,
Yeah, it,
to,
it it absolutely applies to leadership and work and
yeah.
working in those environments, or in your personal relationships or your friendships or with your kid, parenting for sure, educators and how they're engaging with the children, the all of those places, because we're just always in relationship with each other and in different roles. Yeah.
I'd love for you to apply this now to the thing I mentioned earlier about Mark. I'm not feeling anxious. I am anxious.
Yeah.
How do you apply your life's practice and writing, to a high schooler, a college student, a partner, whoever, who just feels as if, um, you know, you see what's happening in our country right now. People have different perspectives around that, but the people who say they're anxious have one perspective on it. The people who are angry have another perspective on it. But let's use the anxiety example. So we've got, um, there's climate disaster, there's wars, there's political division, there's AI uncertainty about what kind of job I'm going to have when I graduate. Mark,
Oh
I
yeah.
am just one big bundle of anxiety.
I
And I'm,
am one big bundle of anxiety. Yeah. For years now, when people have said something like that, I would ask them like, what would be what's different for you when if you're here right now and you're saying that I'm noticing you saying that, and instead you're saying that, and instead you say I'm noticing that anxiety is here right now in this moment. Anxiety is an emotion, fear and uncertainty together. Anxiety is an emotion, and all emotions are energy in motion. They come and go. So what happens when you say I'm noticing anxiety here right now? What's the difference between saying I am anxious, or I am an
mm-hmm,
anxious person? Because when you identify from that state, you basically have a contact lens or glasses, and that's influencing your perception of every moment. But instead, if you allow anxiety to be a thing, and you're saying anxiety is here, what do you notice that's different?
mm-hmm,
I think for a lot of people, they notice a slight somatic shift in their body. Now all of a sudden they are not that thing, but now there is that thing that's here. There's a little bit of space between their awareness now and the emotion itself, which makes it feel it, to some degree slightly more manageable. Like it's something I can do
mm-hmm.
something with. Now I'm relating to it. And this is what a lot of this comes down to, is like, how are we relating to the life we're living, the
Yeah.
emotional loops, the different things the people in our lives, how are we relating to them? So when you change your languaging around it, and this is something that if you're watching or listening right now, you may have heard before. And if you
Mm-hmm,
have heard it before, allow this to be something that's just bringing it top of mind, which is really 95% of the game, bringing something top of mind so you can work with it in the moments that follow. Anxiety is here. Now I can say, okay, so now anxiety is here. What's anxiety? Anxiety is a physical feeling. It's emotion. And so then the question comes, I can recognize it. If it's a physical feeling in my body and I'm noticing constriction or tension that's there. So first I objectified it. Then what happens is I can play with kind of a small release around the energy, and then I can ask myself the refocus question. Now that I've widened that space a little bit, a whole lot, a different one. Is there another way that I can see this right now? Is there something that can support me
mm-hmm,
right now? What do I need right now? What's a small shift I can do to enhance my relationship to whatever this is that's here right now?
mm-hmm.
We know perception. I'll just say this because everyone listening may or may not know this, but perception is actually so powerful. Ellen Langer, which some of you might be familiar with at a Harvard, she she did this study where um, she had housekeepers in a hotel, and she told half of them that the movement they were doing in their job was the exact amount that was approved by the government as far as the amount of movement you needed to do today to be healthy, and the other group did not. None of the movement changed, but one group lost weight. The group that was told
That
that.
was actually my one of my former graduate students'
Did that one?
dissertation, thesis research with Ellen.
Oh, cool. Yeah. So you see
Yeah.
that connection. So do you know? So there's also that study by Aaliyah Crum and at
Well, that's the
Stanford.
same. That's the same study. I mean, the same
Oh,
research. Yeah.
yeah, but that one was the milkshake study, right?
Yeah.
So that one was around like saying that there's this milkshake has so many calories and this milkshake has so many calories, and people were more satiated with the more calorie milkshake, even though they had the same calories, right?
Exactly. That was her.
Yeah.
That was her work as a graduate student here at Yale.
Yeah. So you know that very well. And so for everyone else who hasn't heard that, what the power around that is that, yeah, our perception, how we see things and how we're redirecting our attention actually impacts our physiology, how we feel about life. So with anxiety, if we're able to objectify it and relate to it with different questions that are going to be more supportive to us, what do I need right now? What's a different way that I can see this? These seem like small things, small emotional pivots in some way, but can be really powerful and allowing us to handle this. Now, I will say this, I'll just say this with this caveat. The higher our emotion, the more convincing and believable our thoughts are, and the more power that's there. So sometimes the intervention in that moment, if we're trying to like make these like little emotional thoughts a different way I can see this, they aren't really grabbing, they aren't changing my physiology. something really feels kind of stuck. I had this feeling. I had this experience with my son. He was late. He was late to work. Couldn't find something. He asked me while I was in the middle of doing my own work to help him find a shirt for him for his work. I go
Mm-hmm.
around the house. I'm frantically looking for this shirt. I'm taking my time out of my work. I look and he's sitting on the couch with his phone. And so I'm like, immediately, I'm like almost enraged. I'm like, what?
Mm-hmm.
How? I ask him, like, you're sitting on your phone. So anyway, we end up finding his shirt. We're driving to work or we're driving to his work. I'm driving to his work because at the time he didn't have a license yet. And I'm pissed off because, and I'm thinking, what am I going to do? Am I going to lecture him right now about this, or am I going to just stay quiet? I felt very stuck because I knew the lecturing wouldn't work,
Mm-hmm.
for him. It wouldn't lead anywhere. So I recognized, I took a moment, I took a breath, I released, but like really nothing was moving. Like I was still feeling like this wasn't working for me. Like this model in this moment, there was no kind of like releasing in the moment that was happening. So I asked myself again, like, what do I need right now? Like what do I need? Sometimes what I realized after that, sometimes we just need a little time.
Mm-hmm.
We just need a little patience for things to shift. Something that's not going to shift in the moment. That's okay. We can have a little compassion with ourselves. Hey, this is a tough moment in life. There's tough moments. I can't figure it all out all the time. So what I need right now is just a little patience. I need a little time to pass. And
Yeah.
that's okay too. Sometimes we
And a
just
little,
need that.
and it's a little bit of perspection, which is that you know that if you go with what is in your mind at that moment, it's gonna make things actually worse.
Yeah,
So
that would have made things worse for sure.
yeah. Well, this has been really cool. I want to make sure that we do a few things before we wrap. The first is I want you to just take a moment and, given all the circumstances that many people have these days in terms of anxiety, stress, overwhelm, what is your biggest hope at present for people?
Uh, in respect to this work right
Yeah.
now, so that that people can feel that you don't. It doesn't need to take it doesn't need to take a big lift to be able to learn through repetition that I have the ability to interrupt what I might consider to be like unpleasant feelings of chronic stress and be able to redirect my attention. I have these are only like tiny emotional pivots I need to make in the ordinary moments of my life. I can feel more resilient with my stress. I can show up better in my relationships as a result of it. This idea that we talked about here, with even in bed when two people are feeling disconnected and lonely,
Mm-hmm.
and I in turn can impact my physical health and enhance my the potential of my longevity, or my health span, to
Mm-hmm.
feel more functional in the years of my life. I'm actually this is a lot of this is biology. I can actually impact my biology, make myself healthier. That's what I'm hoping, that the biggest thing, that this feels doable. There's a simplicity to it. It's not always easy, but that I tried to make it as simple as possible to do a 180-degree shift around the overwhelm to make this feel doable and most of all tangible and engageable in daily life.
Awesome. Well, thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you.